Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew DeSantis.
And I'm Kaylie Shapiro.
And welcome to the 2026 Road to the Kentucky Derby
and the Kentucky Oaks.
Hi, everyone, and we are on the trail to the 2026 Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks. My name is Matthew DeSantis. That's my colleague, Kaylie Shapiro. And Kaylie, how excited are you to kick off this trail to the Derby and Oaks?
So excited. I think I honestly started getting excited for this right when we were leaving Breeders' Cup. So It's never too early to talk Derby Oaks.
It is not too early to talk Derby Oaks. I appreciate everybody tuning in here. Make sure to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube. We're going to have Derby and Oaks coverage literally every single week from here on out until we get to the Derby and Oaks the first Saturday and Friday in May. And before we get to that, though, I want to encourage you to play on NYRA Bets. Use the promo code BONUS200 for up to a $200 deposit match bonus. If you're not playing with NYRA Bets yet, it's a great way to play. So use that promo code BONUS200 today. Now, Kaylie, we love the Derby and Oaks. And last year was our first year doing it together. And, you know, we had a great time engaging with the folks online. Loved hearing everybody's opinion. But there was another reason people might want to tune in to what we have to say this year because of what we said last year.
Definitely. My top horse and your top horse, they ran 1-2 in the Derby, which was honestly like the cherry on top, you know, when the race was run, because we truly had so much fun doing this series last year. And, you know, we do our race previews and then we get to sit down and recap on Sunday, Monday in a more chill setting. And it's just so much fun to talk about, you know, the road to getting there and to follow these horses from now until the Derby and the Oaks.
Absolutely. We've been following some of these horses since the summer. And now we're at this point and getting ready really because the rubber is going to meet the road. But yeah, you were on Sovereignty early last year. I remember looking at that Los Al Futurity and thinking journalism looked like a monster. And, you know, they ran 1-2 and they ran 1-2 a lot. And so listen, it's going to be a lot of fun to kick things off this year. Now, this is kind of a special kickoff episode. We're going to talk a little bit about our initial top 5 rankings. We're going to talk a little bit about Breeders' Cup success to the Derby success and lack thereof in some instances. We're going to talk a little bit about who's maybe already making a name, but who maybe is in the background and not yet even debuting or breaking their maiden yet. Things along those lines. We're going to be back later in the week with a preview of the Goldenrod and the Kentucky Jockey Club, which are both point races. Oh, incredible fields for both.
Really strong fields, and we'll have a, you know, even more of a concrete vision. Nothing's concrete until really, you know, a month out.
Maybe they load into the starting
Not even until like a day before. Yeah, nothing's concrete ever, but it's going to be so much fun to see how those horses stack up against each other this week. They're all meeting for the first time. Baffert sending that Explora filly, which is super interesting, and we'll see how they all stack up, and our lists will change probably week to week dramatically. But that's the fun of it.
That is the fun of it indeed. And we are going to have a lot of fun with this. But listen, let's dive into some facts because we were both out at Del Mar for the Breeders' Cup this year. And on the boys' side, Ted Naffy certainly kind of stamped himself as the preeminent Derby hopeful early on, just because he is a perfect 4-for-4 now. Won the Breeders' Futurity going 2 turns, won the Juvenile going 2 turns. We've seen juveniles like Forte, like Fierceness come back and be favored, or in Forte's case, would have been favored in the Kentucky Derby. So we've had some success, but this also led us to talk a little bit about what has historically been that success between the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and the Derby specifically here. And these are some numbers I pulled, which I thought were interesting. We've had the Breeders' Cup Juvenile since 1981. And in the 44 runnings of it, only 56% of the winners have made the starting gate. But what's interesting is since 2015, that's your Nyquist one, 80% have made the starting gate. So recently, we've seen a lot of success between horses winning the Juvenile, and even if they don't win the Kentucky Derby, running in the Kentucky Derby.
And I think that can be attributed to a lot of factors. It can definitely be attributed to the point system being put in place, that's for sure. And I think it could also do a little bit with having a 2-year-old and they win the Juvenile or they run well in the Juvenile, and then you start Derby dreaming. And a lot of connections do so. And that's how, you know, the Citizen Bulls of the world end up in the Derby. And that's just an example. A horse horse that is distance challenged and
Yeah.
is excelling at a mile right now. And
Yep.
now, he's done now, but a horse that was a true miler that ran in the Derby, and you'll see a lot of that. So I think that's also another factor for sure.
You bring up a great point, because basically Ted Naffy is in the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby. He's got 40 or 50 points already. That's historically always been more than enough to be in the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby. So if you have a horse, because of the point system, that already won the juvenile, you can have a very light 3-year-old campaign. You don't need to go nuts. Pick your spot. You maybe run 1-2 preps, less chance of an injury or something fluky happening, and you still end up in the starting gate. And so, yeah, it is interesting, though. One thing I will say, since 1981, those 44 winners of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile have combined for 53 subsequent graded stakes wins. Now, that's not really that many. It's a little over 1 per winner. But since 2015, those 10 juvenile winners have attributed to 21 subsequent graded stakes races, including 5, if I'm not mistaken, for essential quality.
Wow.
So, and fierceness. Fierceness and essential quality each got 5. So interesting to see that we've seen some of these horses in recent years really come out of this race strong. But listen, people tune in because they want to see what our top 5s are.
Yeah.
So let's get into it.
This is very interesting information. I mean,
that's
for sure. And what I will say on the Oak side is that, in recent years, it has not been as successful as it was in the past. Breeders' Cup Juvenile for the fillies. I mean, if you look at the horses that have won the Oaks, you can make a lot of sense out of that. Some of them didn't run in the juvenile fillies. And, if you look back in the day and you see like the Coach and Zito and this and that, like it's a lot of those numbers that are contributing to the success back in the day as opposed to now. Although there has been some recent success, but not as strong as this.
No, not as strong as this. It is funny to see how perhaps the point system has helped some of the boys and maybe hindered some of the girls. Some of the fillies have been a little later developing. We have some more data on that a little bit later. But listen, let's dive into our initial top 5s. And this is, again, written in sand, perhaps, certainly written in very erasable pencil, because things are going to evolve between now and the first Saturday or Friday in May. But you and I, amazingly, we did this apart. We didn't do this exercise together. We landed on the same top 2. And I have to say, I feel proud as a proud alma mater of Furman University. What is the Furman University mascot? The mighty Paladin. And Paladin is number 1 on both of our lists. Shout out to Furman in Greenville, South Carolina. But talk to me why you like Paladin and why you have him up here as a horse in number 1 on your prospect list.
I mean, we were together when we saw him that day at Aqueduct. My jaw was like on the floor just at how much he resembles Gunrunner. I mean, he resembles Gunrunner way more than his half brother did today. At Aqueduct. Paladin, sired by Gunrunner. Top class connections, and it's giving major Sierra Leone vibes, this horse. The time of year that Chad debuted him. I'd imagine that the Remsen is probably the next stop for this horse, and that's very likely. And I'd imagine that he's going to be a big favorite in that race. He's super impressive. I thought that, there was a lot of bumping taking place down the stretch. Who was the horse?
I heard it was a Pletcher horse.
Yeah, it was a Pletcher horse bumping with him down the stretch. And I think that if that hadn't taken place and his momentum wasn't stopped like that, he could have won by 5 that day. So that was certainly enough for me on debut. He was very impressive.
I thought he was very impressive. You mentioned a lot of Sierra Leone vibes. Why is that? Well, he was a $1.9 million son of Gunrunner, and Sierra Leone was a $2.3 million son of Gunrunner. Paladin, like Sierra Leone, was trained by Chad Brown, jockeyed by Flavian Pratt, and owned by the exact same ownership group that had Sierra Leone. So we're running it back a year later, basically, with a high-priced Gunrunner who debuted at Aqueduct, going a 1-turn mile, and is now pointed to the Remsen in his second start. I mean, they are following the Sierra Leone playbook, and we saw how that turned out for Sierra Leone. Nearly won the Derby and ended up winning the Breeders' Cup Classic that year.
Oh, definitely. And shout out to Brooks. I know he's super high.
Oh, yes.
He's super high on this horse. I know that for a fact. And just seeing how much he resembled Gunrunner really excited me. He's a beautiful bodied horse, and he's not nearly done growing. And I think that he's going to be a big monster next year. similar to what we saw with Sierra Leone.
I think so too, and I think 2 Turns is going to suit Paladin very well. Now we both have a horse in number 2 that's going to be running this coming weekend at Churchill Downs, and that is a Brad Cox horse who absolutely just was jaw-dropping in debut. Further ado, this is one who's another gun runner and popped a massive buyer speed figure in that debut. I'm excited to see what he can do in the Kentucky Jockey Club.
Definitely. And he won by 20 last time out.
Yeah,
very,
not bad.
Very impressive. And you'd imagine another gun runner. He's out of a Sky Mesa mare. He's only going to continue to improve as the races go longer, just as we saw with his figure. So another one that's pretty exciting, Spendthrift owned as well. Yeah. Connections. So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Spendthrift owned, I have number 3 as Ted Nafi. You have him number 4. Yeah. We both love this horse. Obviously, a perfect 4 for 4. He's going to be the champion 2-year-old colt after winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And I do have questions about whether or not he can get the 1.25 miles. I think that obviously Todd Pletcher is going to handle him very well. They're going to take him down to Florida. He's already down there. Looks like they're going to target either the Holy Bull or the Fountain of Youth first, and then the Florida Derby. So that's going to be the very typical Forte fierceness track that Pletcher will take with his top horses a lot of times. And again, I have him 3. I might, in terms of, do I think he can win the Kentucky Derby? I don't know. But here's what I do know. He's going to run in the Kentucky Derby.
I think he could. That's my opinion. And it's crazy that I'm saying that because he's sired by Into Mischief. And, and everyone's already talking about how the distance is a huge question. Of course, the distance is literally a question for every single one of these horses. It does not matter what they're like. Literally, it's a question for everybody. And I don't know, Into Mischief sired a ton of Derby winners.
Just last year.
Just saying. And then also on top of it, the damn Streak of Luck, she's sired by Tappet, correct?
Yeah.
And he looks a lot like her. And that's something that I noted when she went through the sales ring. And I will say, I made this list this morning before we just watched the race 5 at Aqueduct today. Credit history, I have in number 3. If I, had watched this race, before I made this list, I would still take a shot with this horse, probably put him number 5, just to have something a little creative, a horse that hasn't quite popped yet. And I would have had Ted Nafi in 3rd. Ted Nafi for me, I keep watching the replay and the movement, the action that this horse has gives me hope that he can get the distance. And he might not be able to, but out of all the horses that have a question mark based on their pedigree, he's the only one that I would have on my list out of any of those.
And listen, you bring up Into Mischief earlier. Obviously, we've seen him sire Kentucky Derby winners before, Authentic, and then obviously with Sovereignty. Not only that, he's been a sire of sires of Kentucky Derby winners because he sired Golden Sense, who of course then sired Mystic Dan. So Into Mischief has a lot of impact on the Kentucky Derby, even if you go, well, he's distance limited. When you throw that Tappet influence underneath, that's going to help things, just like the Bernardini influence with Sovereignty last year. And you even mentioned the physicals of how Ted Nafi looks more like a Tappet, quite frankly, because he is that roan gray kind of color. And listen, he's a really fun horse to talk about. And I think he can absolutely get the 1 1/8 at Churchill or at Gulfstream Park. So again, if I'm going to take, he's easy money for being in the starting gate at this point for the Derby.
Absolutely. And I will say, like what I was saying about his action, it's not on par with Sovereignty, but it's very similar. He has a very similar action that I like the way he gets over the track in terms of getting the distance, similar to what I saw in Sovereignty as a 2-year-old. So that gave me sort of hope, for the possibility of getting a 1.25 miles, but we won't know until the first Saturday of May.
We won't.
But I wouldn't rule him out of that.
And to point that out about, distance is a question mark on everybody. You see a horse like Journalism, sired by Curlin, out of an Uncle Mo mare. You and I have talked about this a lot. Journalism should have loved every single inch of a 1.25 miles. Kind of flattened out at a 1 1/8 a lot of times. And, getting a 1.25 miles is not easy for anyone. These gun runners seem to like it a lot, so that's a pedigree that we both like, hence our top 2. But even sometimes when it looks like there's a lot of pedigree for distance on paper, getting a 1.25 miles is really different from getting 9 furlongs.
Absolutely.
And you could be a big time grade 1 dirt winner going 9 furlongs and not be able to get that last furlong at a 1.25 miles. So now you mentioned Sovereignty. Incredible. My number 4. some sovereignty vibes insofar as trained by, no, not Billy Mott, but Riley Mott.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
So Riley Mott, incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Third career start was the Street Sense. Wait a second. Third career start for Sovereignty was the Street Sense. They both put on impressive debuts.
This is interesting.
I don't know. He's an interesting horse at this point.
Yeah.
Listen, you win the Street Sense. I think that's always you win going 2 turns at
Mhm.
Churchill Downs. That is always saying something, be able to get that. So I threw Incredible in there at number 4. I'm not saying he reminds me of Sovereignty in terms of his action or his pedigree or his ability to get a mile and a quarter, but interesting father-son connection. That'd be really cool to see, obviously Riley have a Kentucky Derby start of the year after his dad won the Derby.
Certainly. And on the topic of the Mott family, that's definitely very interesting.
Yeah.
I just want to touch again on credit history. I know he might have, put in a little bit of a clunker today, but he had a difficult trip caught behind horses. And you'd imagine, the first, when I saw him in the last race, he was a bit green.
Yeah.
And then I looked up his sales work.
Yeah.
He went 10-3 at the sale.
Oof.
And he sold for a decent amount.
Yeah.
I think that they would have gotten double if that horse ran in a straight line.
Yeah.
He was weaving all over. That's why the work was 10-3. I mean, he was weaving all over.
Right.
Very green. So, I trust in Mott, maybe put everything together with this horse, with this credit history, and see what we see from him in the future. But he could very well be knocked off my list next week.
Yeah, we'll see. Like I said, these just change and evolve. Now we both have a Baffert horse at number 5, and it's interesting because I had 3 horses listed at my number 5. They were Litmus Test, Boyd, and Desert Gate. I referred to that as the Bob Baffert placeholder. It wasn't that I necessarily believe in any one of them, but I just go, Bob's going to have a horse, and these are the 3 right now, but Bob might have a horse that we haven't even seen yet. But
he 100% does.
Well, yes, he has many horses we haven't seen. But Boyd, I thought was interesting. He was so impressive in debut. Big buyer speed figure, is going to have to obviously stretch out. There's already been discussions. Can he get the 10 furlongs? But again, like we said before, that's going to be a question for a lot of these horses, even if you do have some good pedigree behind it. Listen, I'm having him there, but Litmus Test, very impressive horse. We've gotten to see him twice at Keeneland and at Del Mar.
Yeah, and it's not a bad idea to have a Bob Baffert placeholder. I mean, it's a little interesting to me, this angle. And, you guys can let me know in the comments if you agree, or you let me know if you've ever thought about this.
Yeah.
But, last year was his first year back in the Derby.
Yeah, after the suspension.
Don't you think that the chances are that the group that he has been, grouping up since then. And I think that they would have a stronger group of horses going into this year.
Yeah.
That's my idea.
Yeah, the Avengers, I think, will have, a much stronger. That's kind of the ownership group that has backed Bob out in California, kind of the name they've given themselves, to be fair. We're not, it's not a negative connotation, but they kind of the Avengers coming back after this 3-year suspension. And I'd imagine he's going to have a pretty strong group. And so, we'll see. I mean, the Los Al Futurity is going to be in a couple of weeks, and that's going to be a big effort to see who's going to be out there. But listen, the boys, it's one thing there. Let's flip over to the girls, though. And the girls, this feels so much more wide open in some ways. It's funny. Our list had a lot of the same horses in slightly different orders, though. And, it just doesn't feel like there's a filly who's really stamped herself. Last year was immersive coming out of that amazing 2-year-old campaign. And then she went to the bench, unfortunately, for that long time. I have Belle Ballerina up top for Brendan Walsh. This one's running in the Goldenrod. We'll have some really interesting stats about the Goldenrod when we preview it later this week. You have a horse we got to see in person, meaning another gun runner, if I'm not mistaken. And this one, she looked real impressive. And I knew you're very high on her.
Yeah, my jaw dropped when I saw her in person. And I didn't, she was one that I looked at the past performances going into the juvenile fillies. And I was like, I think I had her in my top 4, probably 4th. And just thinking it was a big step up for her. But then when I saw her in person, I almost ran to the windows. Just, based on the way that she looks. She's very impressive. It's Mike McCarthy trainee, Steve Owners' journalism. And that was just her second career start.
It was.
She finished up very well. And she didn't have the easiest of trips
No,
either.
she didn't.
So she's
Yeah.
a bit of a wild card that, like you said, in a division where no one's stamped as the leader yet,
Yeah.
I'm just going to take a shot and put her, up front. I think we can see a big step up from her the next time that we see her. And I know that she's working, or she put in a work since Breeders' Cup. So that's
always
also
good to see.
positive.
Always very positive to see getting back on the work tab. And I will say, that was one of the funnier moments of Breeders' Cup weekend. I remember you were recording. We were at the kind of walkover point for the juvenile fillies. And you're sitting there and you have your phone up and you're recording all of them. And Meaning walks by and you just do this. And you kind of look back at me and I go, I saw. And it's just like, yeah, she's physically very impressive for a horse that's only run twice. She's going to get a lot bigger. Now, a horse that we're going to see this coming weekend in the Goldenrod is Explora, who finished second in that juvenile fillies, which we should mention was basically a merry-go-round. Super Corridoro got it up front. Explora ran second, and they just ran 1-2 the whole way around. Bob sends her to Kentucky. To me, that means she's live.
Oh, yeah, she's live. And you think about it, think about the one thing really that impacted the juvenile fillies right from the start. Iron Orchard didn't break. She was supposed to be a major pace presence in that race, and that changed up the dynamics. And not to take away from Super Corridora at all, but the dynamics changed, and that filly literally went to her knees. So at the end of the day, Explora, in my mind, still ran pretty well. I love her pedigree. She's Blaine filly out of a Bernardini mare, and she impressed me. She impressed me physically as well, and I think it's a really positive sign that he's sending her to California. To Kentucky.
No, I take that as a very positive sign too. And obviously, there's been some discussion about field sizes out in California for some of these Derby and Oaks prep races and things like that. But Explora, very impressive filly, and I think big things there.
Definitely. And she gets blinkers back on Saturday, which she ran with in her first two starts, and then they took it off for her last two. So that's also interesting that she gets them back on now and comes from a decent family. No immediate runners, but just a fun fact to spice it up. Her second dam actually finished second to Zenyatta like once or twice, which I thought was interesting. So she was a runner, comes from a family of good.
Absolutely. No, listen, it's always positive to see. Now, I have Meaning number 3. I saw a lot of the same things you did. I think she's a really intriguing prospect for Michael McCarthy. And again, out there in California, the field sizes might not be that big, but McCarthy's been creative about where he can spot his horses in some instances. And a horse that you have third, I have fourth, Life of Joy, another one that's going to be running in the Goldenrod. And stop me if you've heard this before, another gun runner. These gun runners, they can run, it turns out. They're pretty good. Life of Joy, though, this is a Brad Cox horse that listen, Brad Cox fillies, they know how to run too.
Definitely. And he debuted her at Horseshoe Indy. Think Good Cheer.
Yeah.
He debuts a lot of nice fillies there.
He does. He really does.
She stepped up into her next start and in the Rags to Riches and won. So she's undefeated. She faced winners in her second start and won. And, decent obviously really good connections with Brad Cox and gun runner out of a Malibu Moon mare. She's going to continue to improve, and IRAD staying up as well on Saturday. So that's another positive. And, she's one to watch at this point.
I think so. And I know I didn't touch much on Belle Ballerina, who is my top choice, but she's the half to Pretty Mischievous. What did Pretty Mischievous do? She won the Kentucky Oaks. It's not a bad pedigree to come from. So, and she's a Godolphin horse as well. So I love to see that for Brendan Walsh. And I think that 70 buyer speed figure might not have been big, but I think you could see her move forward going 2 turns on debut. So I'm a big fan of this one as my number 1. You have her number 4. Number 5, I'll just briefly touch Super Corridora. Much the same reason with Ted Nafi. She just racked up a ton of points for the Oaks starting gate by winning the juvenile fillies. And if the connections want to, they can handle her very carefully from here on out. She's got great early speed. That always is a deadly thing out in California where you could absolutely just rack up more points doing that.
There's nothing wrong with her.
Yeah, and so do I think she's a major presence at this point? I'm not sure, but I know she's going to be in Louisville the first weekend in May, and that's why I have her 5th. But you have an interesting horse, Consequent, in 5th. And this is one who just ran, I think, last week, right?
Yeah, but really quick to touch on Bella Ballerina, just to add, because she only ran once. She got a 70, which is like pretty much on par with what Pretty Mischievous ran in her first start. So that's nothing to be discouraged by as a filly, especially.
Yeah.
And then the horse that finished second to her on debut, Debbie Doll, she won in her next start. So that was also positive to see. And then this horse that I have in number 5 just ran last week, and this is one that people are probably going to think I'm nuts for in the comments because she got a really light figure.
Oh, she did, yeah.
She did, but I don't really care at this point. I mean,
for number 5, have fun with it.
Exactly, and there's no reason why she can't improve. If anything, I love the fact that she just won easily and got that figure, and her pedigree suggests that she's a filly that's not going to excel going that distance anyway. So when she stretches out, she's definitely going to improve a lot. And she comes from a really big family of Oaks winners. I mean, she comes from the same family as Malabat and a lot of nice mares.
Julia Shining.
Julia Shining. And she's a little green, but she won pretty professionally still at the same time. If that makes any sense. But she does have a lot of improving to do, and one that I just keep my eye out for.
Yeah, it's all about keeping your eye out for things here on the Derby and Oaks Trail. And to that point, Kaylie, we also looked at some numbers and crunched some numbers, and we went back and looked at the top 3 finishers in the Derby and Oaks since we instituted the point system in 2012 technically, and then 2013 was the year that it came to fruition in the Oaks and Derby. And we said, well, when did these horses debut? Have we even seen the Oaks or Derby winner debut yet? And so when you look at these numbers, you realize the Derby horses that finish in the top 3, most of them debut a little bit later. August is a very popular day to debut. The top 3, 23% of them debuted in August. But 20% debuted in October. And you had 15% who debuted in December or as a 3-year-old. So a lot of these horses that might end up becoming very consequential in the Derby trail didn't even debut yet, let alone break their maidens. But when you look at the Oaks, very similar dynamics, not a lot of early, but you see that September, October, November, a lot of those fillies are making their debuts at that point since 2013. Yeah,
there's a pretty high possibility that they haven't even broken their maidens yet or debuted. I mean, I'm looking at November. This is pretty decent percentage, almost 13% debuted in November. And then I'm looking at Saturday's card at Churchill. It's stacked with first-time starters and maidens, and I definitely would be paying attention to all those horses running that day. And we'll be excited to recap, the following day with you about what we've seen, because you're right, there's a good chance we haven't seen the winner yet.
100% we've not seen it. That's a very distinct possibility. One of the things we'll always see on these big days, particularly early on, because Saturday at Churchill is going to be the Stars of Tomorrow 2 day, but you go to Fairgrounds, LeCompte Day, Holy Bull Day. A lot of times there's a big maiden race on the undercard of those days. And there's a horse that's going to pop, and everybody's going to say, the horse you really want out of this day on the Derby and Oaks Trail is fill in the blank. Is from the undercard race, not actually the stakes race. And that can be the case sometimes. And so you can get fast-tracked pretty quickly. A horse like Mage, I remember, was fast-tracked pretty quickly after breaking its debut. Obviously Justified, very famous instance of that. But you can have these horses that are not debuting yet. They can really pop up there. And just to reiterate further, when you look at horses that have broke their maiden, so that previous stat was just debuts. When do they actually break their maiden? Well, out of the last 13 Kentucky Derbies, the horses that finished in the top 3, nearly 30% of them did not break their maidens until November. And almost 20% didn't break their maidens until they were 3 years old. So again, we're talking about these horses that are a little bit more established, that have a little bit more of a resume, but this tells you that might not be the case. That's for sure. Very interesting information. And definitely, you always think about, you don't want to think too early, get too excited. Last year was really the one time that I, right off the bat, that I was like, this is the winner. I mean, this year, I do not feel that whatsoever about a lot of the horses. I think a lot of them are very exciting. Like a lot of the horses we talked about are exciting. But
like you said, there's a huge chance we don't know the Derby winner or the Oaks winner's name yet.
It's possible. And particularly you look at the Oaks numbers, geez, what is that? 25% haven't broken their maiden by December or they broke it as a 3-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge number. So again, this year in particular, this Oaks field feels so wide open that I would not be shocked if you mentioned there might be a really nice filly on the undercard or something like that at one of these big days. And maybe that's the filly that really gets the job done ultimately.
Definitely. And for fillies, it makes a lot of sense too, because, that once they get going and they get into a good form and they've been racing for not too long, but a decent amount of time, like that's when you want them to pop. Fillies can bounce, more easily than colts. So these numbers make a lot of sense. And I'm really excited though to see all the new faces that we have coming onto the scene on Saturday at Churchill. It's an amazing card.
It really is. And listen, folks, from here on out, it's, people will say, oh, well, you just guys want to talk about Derby and Oaks. No, literally every single week there's going to be a Derby or Oaks prep race.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's going to happen because you know what the week after next is? It's Remsen and the Demoiselle. And by the way, you talk about some important races, the Goldenrod and the Demoiselle for fillies.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to see significant Kentucky Oaks horses in those two races.
Mm-hmm.
And just to share a little factoid, the last 4 winners of the Kentucky Oaks all ran in the Goldenrod.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, McFly.
Yeah.
That's an important race to be following in November. So listen, it's going to be a lot of fun. Kaylie, we got more of these coming up. We're going to have a preview of the Goldenrod and the Kentucky Jockey Club on Wednesday here on NYRA Bets, but we got a lot of great content for you. So make sure to check it all out. Are you ready to do this whole road again?
Yes, literally so excited.
I can't wait. It's not the yellow brick road. What is it? The rose brick, the lily brick road. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to end up in Louisville at the end of the day. And so thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the 2026 Road to the Kentucky Derby and the Kentucky Oaks. For Kaylie Shapiro, my name is Matthew DeSantis. Wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races. And reminding you, friends, it's now post time.